Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and you're listening to Select Star from Data Lake. And in this episode, I want to do is talk about what is a semantic layer, what is a metrics layer, what are these things, these terms you oftentimes hear when it comes to what's oftentimes referred to as a semantic layer. Okay, so let me separate these two terms, semantics and metrics. Okay, so when we talk about semantics, we're talking about just generally sort of like the conceptual, sort of logical meaning of things. Okay, how things sort of relate to each other. So the idea is that generally you'll have your dimensional model, so you'll have all your tables all sort of nice and modeled in your data warehouse or data lakehouse, but oftentimes the way the data isn't what people need to do the report or BI dashboard they need. They need to create sort of different data points, metrics, to capture certain things. So you might have a list of sales opportunities, and you may want to create a metric saying the number of opportunities that have been lost for over 90 days, as an example. Okay, so that might not be something that is a metric you have right off the bat in your data model, but it's a metric that you report. Okay, so you can calculate that metric by doing some SQL that counts all, basically takes a look at the date and the current date, figures out the number of days, and then filters it by whichever ones have more than a number of 90 or more. You can run that SQL, but again, that has to get processed. So if I'm creating a BI dashboard or report that people are going to access frequently, that query is being pushed and then reprocessed every single time. And they're not going to necessarily get that instantaneous like millisecond report. They're going to be watching this little loader as that query runs for even if it's just a few seconds. Especially when you're doing like sort of aggregation queries where you're aggregating a lot of data like that together. Okay, so a semantic layer sort of is like doing two things. It's gonna do two things. It's gonna kind of capture you're gonna create pieces that capture that meaning. Okay, so you're able to kind of organize the data into maybe essentially virtual tables that help capture the meaning of certain data sets you need. But two, a semantic layer oftentimes has some element of caching the data, meaning, hey, this calculation of how many sales opportunities lost over 90 days, we already calculated it. I don't need to calculate it. It's not changing so frequently that I need to recalculate it every time someone accesses this report. So let's cache it. Let's create a copy of it somewhere that we can use when people request that query, and we'll substitute that query for this cached version of the information. Okay, and usually the semantic layer type thing oftentimes would just originally was nestled within the BI tool. So the BI tool, so like Power BI, Tableau, they all have these features that allow you to cache some of the data that you might be building your BI dashboards on. The problem here is that it's now tied to that particular tool. So if I'm using Power BI and Tableau, depending on different teams within the same company, they're going to have to create separate caches for the same data. Okay, and this is where a tool like Dremio becomes really, really useful, because Dremio is already offering you a really high-speed query engine that's already really fast and connect to several different data sources, but you're able to curate that semantic layer, whether you're curating the meaning by creating sort of that visual data, virtual data mart, which you see when you walk into Dremio, where you can see this hierarchy of data sets and how they relate to each other. So you get that semantic meaning, but you also are getting that metrics layer where basically you can cache the metrics that you need. This is usually done through Dremio's reflections feature. Okay, so basically you have these tables that represent the specific sort of versions of the data you need that can then get cached by enabling reflections. And so this means if you have a dashboard, if one team is using Power BI and another team is using Tableau, they are both going to benefit from the cache on those data sets. Okay, but the cool thing about this is that Dremio's reflections go far beyond than just a simple cache. They're essentially iceberg tables. So basically, depending on the query you're sending to them, they can get substituted, but they can also accelerate recomputation. And then two, they can benefit other queries. So for example, if you have, let's say you have a view that's called view, you have a table A, and then from table A, you've created view B. And then from view B, you have three other views that were created, C, D, and E. Okay, we could enable reflections on view B. But since view C, D, and E are all created from view B, a reflection on view B would be used for queries for C, D, and E as well. Okay, so you end up getting a real good sort of maximum value for that cache, because Dremio is aware of how all these data sets relate to each other. It's aware of those semantics because you've curated those semantics on the semantic layer. And this is going to give you a tremendous. So you again the fast query engine, but then you're getting this nice metrics layer that can connect to whatever the consumption tool is. So again, across all your client tools that receive the data, they can all benefit from that caching. You're not attached to having to use. And again, that's also going to reduce your costs, okay? Because one, using the Dremio query engine is already going to be cheaper than, let's say, using most data warehouse compute, okay? But then when you add in the caching layer that Dremio has, it's going to reduce those compute costs even further and deliver the data across multiple client tools very efficiently without having to create multiple caches per tool. So you get a lot of benefit when using a semantic layer, which is a part of the total offering that Dremio offers. Okay, and that's kind of the great things about Dremio. It's not just a semantic layer. It's a lot of these things that kind of act as an intermediary. So that allows you to have this sort of centerpiece between where the data is coming from and where the data is going that kind of handles all the stuff in between in a very nice, efficient, easy to use way, making everything a lot easier. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you all later on. This is Alex, and you're listening to Select Star from Data Lake.